We were approached by a client that wished to enter a food market in the food industry, in a particular emerging market. Had done a huge amount of work to understand the market segmentation, what were the buying characteristics, what were the income points, was this something that could be targeted at high income people, or was it a mass market proposition, and so on. We're about to make the investment, but had not addressed the fundamental question, do you need a license to actually do this? Turned out they did. And it was a 2-year process to actually get approval. And they saved themselves about a 15 million advertising launch cost, which would have been wholly ineffective because they wouldn't have been able to supply the demand for 2 years anyway. And that is where a little bit of care can have a really big payoff.
So what are the dangers you as a foreign investor have to look out for if you want to come to Vietnam? Let me tell you a war story here. One day at an official function, I met one of my clients then, and he told me, just by chance, that he had the intention to buy a machine park owned by a Vietnamese domestic company and the whole buildings, to establish a 100% foreign-owned company in Vietnam. And I told him also, have you checked whether this machine park and the buildings are free from any encumbrance? And he even didn't know. So 2 days later he came to my office, instructed me to check this. I checked this and found out that the whole machine park and the buildings had been mortgaged. So he was shocked. If he wouldn't have known this, he would have paid to the seller and lost millions.
As well as who you're working with, it pays to know who's working for you. In China, the talent war means resume fraud is a huge problem.
This is a guy who'd had a somewhat successful career, I think in human resources in a major retail chain in China, very famous international retail chain. And he got that job partly on the basis of his educational qualifications. The only thing is that when we checked his qualifications, we found that MIT, which is where he got his degree from, his MBA, we thought it was rather odd that MIT would misspell the word field and get the E and the I the wrong way around, in the field of human resources. Except field was spelled incorrectly. So of course we checked it out. We called MIT, and predictably they'd never heard of the candidate. And so we then had a conversation with the candidate. It was very, very odd. We can you help us here, because we can't. Nobody at MIT seems to know who you are. Maybe can you help us? Why can't we find your information? To which point he said, "Well, of course MIT are not going to have my information." And we said, "Well, why not?" Well, because recently I did a project in the US for Nokia, and in doing that project I had to have security clearance, and so nobody's allowed to talk about me. So we said, "Oh, great! So now you've got security clearance. Well, actually, now that you've told us you've got security clearance, now you also need to show us your security clearance." Of course, we never saw or heard from that candidate ever again.